Hello, this is Dale Matthews. On the flip side is Mike Jones. Hello, Mike.
Yes, I should have myself spun upside down here right now.
Right, yeah, and he could too, because he's the technical whiz.
Yes.
Uh,
And,
the
and
flip,
we all love the fire department.
yes, and do you love your fire department? Well,
Yes, and they'll love us back for a price.
yes, they will, and there's a lot of that going on, but that's for another show. People who love you for a price.
Yeah.
This is tonight's going to be part one of a two-part story to outline Josephine County's plan, led by Cheryl Walker, to establish minimum standards for the area's subscription-based fire service companies. What could possibly be controversial about that? Well,
Right.
we're going to talk about it because that's what we do here. Mike, would you please explain for those of us who don't know, including me? I live in Grants Pass and I want to drive a car, but in order to drive a car, I have to prove that I've got insurance. On the flip side is what you have with property. Please tell us about that.
Well, if you live out in the county, in most places in the county, you have to have a subscription fire service, and your
In order
insurance
to get
company.
insurance, yes.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, or they will certainly require that you do have insurance at all times. And this insurance, um, I mean, it depends on who you go with as to how they charge you. And in this particular case, when I first came here, Rural Metro wanted to charge you based on um, the the assessed value of your house. I thought, wow, that's really bizarre. Because if your house is new, but it's no bigger than a house that's old, how is that fair?
Well,
Chances are
I
the
mean,
newer
your
house
neighbor
is
could have
built
a
with
house
better.
made. I'm sorry, your neighbor could have a house made of straw, and you could have a house made of brick.
Yes,
You know,
my house made
and
of bricks. That's right.
really,
Because I'm one of the smart piggies. I don't mess around with straw or sticks. Yeah, that's right.
well, so
But 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 the point is that a house of straw and a house of sticks and a brick house all being the same square footage, um, are not equal in terms of fire, and so it's a weird way of doing it. It really is a strange
well,
method of
call me irresponsible. Many people do, but
yes.
I
There's a
want
song that goes with that.
yes, I want the lowest possible auto insurance rates because one, I'm taking a gamble, similar to what we're all doing with the safety levy. I'm doing a cost benefit analysis on this, and I'm saying, okay, I will get the lowest possible cost for my auto insurance so I can drive. Now,
Right.
Merlin-based County Fire and Security, they used to be called Inland. They believe that the idea of setting up fire service company standards is part of a concerted effort to drive them out of business. That's what they think, because they've
Mhm.
got low prices and supposedly inferior service offerings. And this has angered the fire service establishment in this area. And then
Hmm.
Cheryl Walker gets involved. Now, you may remember, we're going to go to a long videotape here. You may remember that Cheryl Walker she was on the flip side of this when there was another Merlin company that wanted to offer subscription based, just seems strange to me, subscription based air ambulance services. And there
Right.
were a number of companies and Chief Hoke out in IV where they have subscription, where they have already a fire district, but they wanted to have certain standards established and didn't feel that this Merlin based company could live up to those. And Cheryl Walker was fighting hard for that Merlin company. Okay. Now comes along Inland, now called County Fire, and she's fighting hard against them because the fire service establishment doesn't like them and their low prices.
Who is the fire service establishment?
We're going to see part of that in this video. And the thing
Hmm.
to watch in this video is, and one thing to remember is, why are you saying Cheryl Walker, Dale? Because Cheryl Walker, it's important to know your liaisons. our Catholic brothers and sisters, know your saints. Well, it's important to know your liaisons. And she is liaison to the to Jenny Hall, I believe, who's sitting there at the table explaining why this is an important thing about safety. She is the liaison. She put her and her husband on Martin Hill on the group that was deciding what the rules would be about air ambulance services. She's the liaison to the people who are deciding these standards for the fire service organization. And so she's a major player in all this, in the background and not so much in the background. The thing to watch for here, besides knowing your players and having a scorecard, is watch for the description of minimum standards. One more little thing. So I talked to Simon Hare out in the hallway after this meeting, and I talked with a couple other people. I said, no, wait a minute. Jenny Hall brought up the idea, if it's similar, of some kind of similarity to Dutch Brothers, they're always getting kicked around in this place, used as an example. Why, if you just take your Dutch Brothers money and spend it on something else, and Dutch Brothers has got to be saying, wait a minute, don't do that. Okay, so she used them as an example. Well, here's my personal example. Maybe it's all wrong. You can send Mike an email explaining why I'm all wrong. And to me, if Dutch Brothers suddenly started selling inferior coffee, unlikely, but what if they did? Well, people would vote with their feet. They would no longer buy things there. But wait a minute, shouldn't we be thinking about the good, about maintaining high quality for county residents and have certain minimum standards? Like well, yes, you would for the building and you might for the electrical system, but what about the standards of the taste of the coffee?
Okay, here's a perfect example. I buy cheap cola because I can't tell the difference. To me, it's all the same. Some people love Pepsi or Coke, and they go, I will not drink anything else. No exceptions. This is the stuff for me. And
now you can see that we're not sponsored by the Koch brothers.
No. The Cola brothers, yes.
No, we're not sponsored by them either. He drinks cheesy cola. It's called cheesy cola.
So, and a lot of times, most of the time, I make it with my Soda Stream, but I'm out of CO2 right now, so that's another story. But the bottom line is that this, I use the free market here. If I want to, I go and get some of this cheesy cola because I like it, and Dale, because he's got money coming out of his ears, he buys the name brand stuff. And
it's just sugar water. It's my one vice.
Yes, it's okay. I got no problem with it. But the situation is, why can't we be trusted by our government to make the right choices about our own health and safety?
Because inland, which is now known as county, has lower prices, Mike, and that has to mean that they've got lesser services, and we must fight tooth and nail against that.
So what they're doing is they're picking winners and losers yet again.
Yes, it does seem that way. It says, yeah. but don't they have a nice argument about keeping us safe? Well, yeah, okay, but aren't we doing the same decision by deciding not to? And the citizens gotten a lot of trouble with Cheryl Walker about opposing her other ordinances. Well, do we need these ordinances to keep us safe, and you're in favor of rats? It's ordinances. That's Cheryl's reason to exist, I think, is to have ordinances.
I personally don't need them looking out for me. I think that there are plenty of private party agencies that would rate these fire services. There's a number of things. There's like a Yelp started as a application where you could go in, and it's kind of social media too. And they started out with ratings on restaurants and stuff, but now they do for every business. And there are a lot of these different types of services that will rate stuff for you and tell you if it's any good or not. And then you go and look at it and you say, okay, I'm willing to take a risk, or I want the top notch, so I'm going to pay these guys down here because their nozzles are made of silver,
Well, this organization, and you're going to see the fire guy sitting there, and he was invited to come up and speak in meeting number 2. Meeting number 1 just takes a couple of minutes to just set the stage for you. Meeting number 2 was on the 10th. That was Thursday when Simon Hare was finally back from whatever. It didn't say where he was, and so he does a lot of talking. It's an organization made up of populated by some of the competition to inland, to county fire. And county fire guys were sitting right there in the audience. They weren't invited to come up and speak. Okay. You may remember that when there were people there that were talking about cutting down trees and etc. Well, Simon Hare wanted his friend who runs a company sitting right up there at the table. Well, Cheryl Walker and company, they don't want inland sitting at the table. Okay. And so the thing to watch for, this could go by fast in this long clip. We're going to let the county have their entire say. And then tomorrow night, we're supposed to have inland here to have their entire say, similar to what we did with the thing with the mines. And so they're going to have county fire. That's what I meant. Okay. And so it used to be called inland. And so the thing to watch for is when they start talking about minimum standards and what does that mean. But first, you're going to hear a little clip from the meeting on the 1st where Wally Hicks says, this is legal counsel. We could be somehow targeted ourselves if it seems as if we're picking winners and losers. That's a paraphrase, but you'll hear what he has to say. Go ahead, Mike.
What is the reason why we can't move on this thing, on these fire standards, or what's the hang-up?
It needs to go through the board, and we now have a draft ready to go.
So there was research conducted that my understanding from reading it is that legally the county can do this if they would like to. There have been for quite some time minimum fire standards that were adopted by the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs Association, which is Josephine and Jackson County. And then there is a draft ordinance that basically establishes a franchise system by which private fire service companies can certify that they meet those minimum standards, and then they are allowed to operate in Josephine County. And then there's actually some relief, is that the right word, if they are operating without that franchise or they have not met the minimum standards. Perhaps something's been allowed to lapse and they no longer qualify.
So we just need the ordinance.
Sure.
You have seen, have you seen the draft?
I don't know if I've seen a most recent draft. Has it changed?
Yes.
Okay. No, I have not seen a most recent draft.
Well, the most recent one was most recently discussed.
Oh, okay. So nothing's happened with that.
Yeah.
So
Really blunt.
yeah, because that's what we're.
Okay. So let's try to be objective, but basically, you're going to get accused of putting somebody out of business, and tell it this is what you're looking at. Okay,
right.
Putting somebody out of business and limiting people's options in regards to protecting their home and property.
They're not putting anybody out of business if they meet the standards. All they have to do is meet standards.
Set up by their competition.
Yeah, I mean, he just said what we said. He just didn't use the same words. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
here's the next
long clip. Here we go.
Yeah.
So a wonderful example of what happens when somebody gets a portion of information, expands it, caresses it to come up with something that has nothing to do with the topic at hand, and spans it out to all of their people on the email list, and people go ballistic because now you're only going to have one fire.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but okay, this really reminds me of when Keith Eck was trying to say to people after you guys have seen the videotape, the county commissioners have had nothing to do with the idea of starting up this levy. Nothing to do with it at all. Boy, there's rumors out there, nothing to do with it, and people in the audience were chuckling quietly because we knew that they did, because we have the tape of them doing it. So now here's Keith Hicks saying, well, this is just a rumor, it's just out there, people are saying it, it takes on a life of its own. Sometimes these things that take on a life of their own are true.
Yes.
Company in the county, and then everybody gets all stirred up and hot and bothered about it, and it has nothing to do with accomplishing a goal that I believe needs to be accomplished. But how do we accomplish that realistically? And that's the struggle. That's really what this whole thing is about, and we go from there. But I think there are some good points that we do need to wrestle through and look at. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, I was going to try to equate this to something like the LDAC recommendations, and this predates you guys on the board, but what we did is we tried to put together a group of respected, educated experts on the subject of land use and come together with those elements that are what do we need to do to improve our code. This is kind of a similar situation, in my opinion. Hopefully we'll have a better outcome than LDAC did, because those just kind of sat there. But I will work on those before the end of my term, I guarantee it. I just need a planning director, a new planning director who's got the time and the energy to do it. But from this perspective, I think we need the people who know this issue in the room on a set committee who can take these comments and say, okay, well, this one's going to work and that one's not going to work. But you guys haven't thought of this. And those kinds of elements, putting them together and then saying, well, here is our recommended product. Then we take a look at it and say, well, this works for us. No, you can't do that. And then, put something out there and see if it goes.
Well, and do you mind if we ask Lang to come up here, because he's been familiar with this whole thing? Don't mind. You want to point your fingers at Jenny because she's just new to the process and the whole thing too, as far as this goes on. But yeah, that's right. Everybody's underway. What's going on? This is not the development of this sitting board. I mean, this has been going on for years and years. And the Fire Chiefs Association been the main catalyst, the main actors on this whole process too. And kudos to them and their patience of beating their head against the wall oftentimes. But this does represent a baseline to me, a baseline of our actions. Where do we go from here? How do we want to look at this? I agree with what you're saying. I mean, my presupposition is I think these are something that are needed, but they need to be understood clearly by the citizenry of the county. If they're not, then we're simply setting ourselves up for a fiasco and a waste of everybody's time. But it needs to be gotten right before we try to do anything else with it. My personal belief. Otherwise, we defeat the whole process in the end, because once this goes up for a vote and everybody goes no, well then this is dead in the water for years after that. So, wanting to try to make it as right as possible. What do you see as the fire district, Fire Chiefs Association? What do you see as a reasoned process to take all this hard work that you guys have put together and represented and had input on, as far as a next step, and pardon the use of the word selling this product, but what do you see as a next step as far?
Hey, Dale, I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me, this guy that's sitting there, is he one of the contract fire people, or is he a county employed fire person?
Now, Deputy Chief Lang Johnson of the Fire Rescue Bureau is, he started out with a Valley Fire Service or Rural Metro Fire Department. And he's the big guy that's behind, my understanding is, behind this organization of competitors, everyone's invited to join, but most of the people that are making these decisions are competitors with this low price service. And so they have a strong.
But this guy is.
Yeah.
Does this guy work for the county, or is he one of the people that gets to benefit or not from these standards?
Well, they have an organization of fire service providers throughout the 2 counties, and so they will argue that they're trying to uphold the highest of standards. And the folks over at County Fire Service in Maryland will argue that they don't like their low price services, and that they don't like the fact that they don't have a number of the same kinds of services that this guy has,
well, they apparently have a lobbying seat at the table here, whereas County Fire does not. And so they're instrumental in setting up standards that they know could benefit or be detrimental to their competition. It sounds very familiar to how things go. Anyway, that's all I wanted to know. Here we go.
Yep.
That goes.
Well, I think any public process is extremely important for the same reason you talked about, and that is that the people need to know what's out there, what the challenges are, what the struggles are, what the liabilities are. Definitely the fire service has changed dramatically over the last 30 years in terms of those liabilities. From what I've read in there, the majority of that work is a culmination of about 25 years or more, almost 3 decades of efforts on behalf of the county to take before public committees, to do the massaging, to do the work. It's definitely evolved as a result of that. The standards that are in there from the last evolution of it back in 2007 are really part of the work that was done to the Chiefs Associations to come up with some minimum standards, because we were struggling not having them here in the county.
And why was there such a struggle?
We couldn't go much longer with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, why?
Well, because there was usually somebody.
Because it was competition. Somebody who would undercut you.
Yes.
That is a problem.
Yes,
I don't like that.
Yes.
We better do something about that.
There were also even politicians who said, now, wait a minute. It looks like you're trying to establish standards. We are. Standards that would promote the idea of using some services. Well, maybe because they're better, and demote others. Well, yes, because they're not as good. In the first meeting, they didn't even, this is a little repetitive from the first meeting because Simon wasn't there. This guy nobody wanted to mention the name of the company. And so I saw him outdoors and I went, are you talking about County Fire? And he was like, well, I said, are they what you would consider to be the bad actor here? Well, yeah, well, they're not really. And, the whole thing, this whole thing is about County Fire. They're going to talk with us tomorrow and tell us their point of view.
Why can't you have Walmart and gooseberries? Why can't you have that? And why can't you just say to the public, hey, listen, buyer beware, like anything else that you buy. Hey, we're not holding your hand when you go to buy a car to make sure that you buy a car that's safe for you.
Yeah, it's supposed to be about safety. So then the question is, if they don't adhere to the safety standards set up by their competitors, then their competitors are going to raise the safety. Now, you'll see the compromise, and this guy's got certain minimum standards he'd like to set up. And even Keith Eckes at some point in this meeting says, no, wait a minute, minimum standards, doesn't that seem to be kind of a bit exclusive? I'm paraphrasing. And well, we don't have to do that, but what we could do is we could come up with minimum standards, and then if they don't meet them, we could tell everybody.
Yeah, right. And that's, listen, they've been doing that quite effectively. Listen, I don't know.
You want to have this out in a big ad, you can buy from them. Okay, but they don't meet the minimum standards that you set up.
Why don't you just put advertising on TV and say, hey, we uphold to the highest standard, and the other guy goes, well, we don't, and we're less, and you could fight it out, and people could have them or not.
Are cigarettes legal? Yes, they are. And do they have a thing on the side of the package that's got a death's head and cancer? Well, yes, I don't want them, but they warn people, and they still take that, not because they're inexpensive, but there's social engineering there too. That's
yes, but listen, even way before they put that stuff on the packages, people
they call them
that
coffin nails.
Yes,
People
of course.
do.
So the point is that this very clearly is, picking winners and losers, and let's all ask ourselves.
Okay, I'm going to ask myself. Go ahead.
Do you really need the government to look out for you, for your safety? Is that what their function is? Now, if you look at the Constitution, there is a provide for the common defense, but that's a military defense of the country. It has nothing to do with protecting you from bad baby food. Okay, so listen, buyer beware. Do your own homework. There are plenty of services out there that the free market provides that will rate any of this stuff if there's a need to do so. So, and that's my opinion on it. And,
Well, in my opinion, the really interesting thing is that Cheryl Walker, who's the impetus behind dredging up these old rules, because they are old and they've never been adopted for a reason. What was that reason? And she hardly has to say a word here. Every once in a while, she jumps in and tells everybody how strongly she feels about this. But she doesn't have to do much because everyone at the table, and as I said, there are guys right in the audience that have got a totally different point of view, but they're not going to be allowed to speak.
Well, why don't they just pipe up and speak?
Because it's against the rules, and Keith Hick could warn them like he's warned me.
Oh, well,
speak, Mr. Matthew.
Wait just a second here. I listen. If you lay down and let these people run all over you, then that's what they're going to do. And how would you like it if they start setting standards for the facade on the outside of your building, and what kind of trash can you're going to have, and what time it's going to be back in from the curb on garbage day? Do you want to live you want to live in a county that's one big homeowners association? Come on.
Let's hear more of what they have to say. We're trying to give them their view. Go ahead.
Yes, we should shut up. There's a lot here.
We'll ask tough questions tomorrow of the other guys.
Yes.
That we were facing as public agencies starting to grow more and more each and every year. So I think the iteration of that is from all those public processes up to that point, and then the roll-in of the adopted standard or policy that the Chiefs Association created that really outlined what was expected to be the minimum standard for any startup, basic volunteer fire department that might come to the county. And all of those standards really don't talk about performance. They're all about just basic common sense business practices. Mm-hmm. Are you complying with the basic essential things that any board like yourselves or a special district would have to struggle with in order to provide good, adequate, minimum services to the community in a safe and effective manner? And for the Chiefs Association, it's really about safety. It is about safety of the community, knowing that the services are being delivered meet some kind of a minimum standard. But it's also about safety for our troops, because public entities are really exposed when they start working with private entities that may or may not meet these minimum standards or any standards whatsoever in their own fire service.
Well, I think that's one of the things that is not clearly understood either. When we think of our fire department in Josephine County, there is no fire department in Josephine County. There are public agencies that are providing fire. There are private agencies that are providing fire coverage.
Correct.
And the same rules are hard to apply to both of them. But in this big picture, do we want them all, regardless, public or private, do we all want them to have a baseline set of regulations that we could go, we know that they all agree. If you're licensed to be a fire service in Josephine County, we know that you've met these criteria.
And to me, it's about, if you're a resident and you have a fire truck show up in your yard and somebody walks into your house, there is an ultimate expectation, I believe, as a citizen, that is a qualified, squared away, liability coverage individual who's coming in to deliver good, adequate service to you. You should have that expectation, regardless of who you're paying for, whether it be a public agency or a private agency. It's about doing the right thing and making sure that that's good, honest services that are there. And I think anybody who's in the business to do it would want to do the same thing. That's what the public entity side of it, because it really is about the public service all the way through, from the beginning to the end.
Now, for a fire service that is up and running, so they have to meet federal OSHA rules and those kinds of things. Why are those not sufficient in order to have these additional rules and regulations?
Good question, Keith.
If I have to qualify for the Oregon laws and federal laws to for OSHA, for instance, so why would those not be sufficient here in this situation?
I guess the easiest answer to that is that they're not all encompassing. Those laws, and it's like you talked to OSHA specifically, is about the protection of the employees themselves. And so it really governs whether you're using adequate training, whether you're using adequate protective equipment, whether it'd be like no different than if you're running any kind of a factory. The OSHA applications or rules for their safety and health and welfare all apply, but that doesn't necessarily cover whether the apparatus is adequate or not. It doesn't set any kind of expectation for a state level standard for training like the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training does. So as you go through each one of those, what you'll find is if you were a startup business and you were looking at doing your due diligence to figure out what you needed to do in order to do an adequate level of service, that's what's highlighted. Mm-hmm. And so really it's not creating any new standards. Everything that's in there already exists. All it's doing is bringing it into one, what I see it doing is bringing everything into one box and saying, hey, if you're going to do this business, here's the standards that we expect you to meet. And they're all really pre-established standards. There's nothing new in there. There's nothing earth-shattering.
Well, I saw that with the liability insurance and the training, PTSD. So
there are more requirements on a contractor or on a taxi cab driver than there is for being a private party.
I mean, one thing that we can say for sure is that the master plan of this thing is not to establish only one fire department agency in the county.
Not at all. I don't think that's the intent at all.
I thought it
sure has we can't do it anyway.
Sure has a vibrant life out there with us folks.
Well, that is the key question. And that's the thing a number of people are asking about. Doesn't it look like we started off with like 5 or 6 of these and they're slowly becoming one? That's the question. Mm-hmm. And while, the commissioners have often in the past, well, everybody's saying this, but of course that's totally not true. A lot of the evidence points to the fact that is happening. And is that going to be the end? Well, we don't know. This could accelerate that. It's certainly not going to push it in the other direction. I guess the biggest question to the public, though, is if 2 boys and a dog fire service have the lowest possible price so that you can get your insurance, if your insurance company is not paying attention, so that you can get your insurance for your property, and they're willing to accept that, would you go with that? And yeah, well, see, remember, these are the same guys that told you that if you don't go with their plan for a levy, why everything's going to fall apart. Well, it hasn't. But their argument is we're trying to keep you safe, which is certain minimum standards. What's wrong with that? One of the problems is it's their competitors that are setting up the minimum standards.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy with the seat at the table. He's the one talking about the standards. And if I caught you right, and you're right about what you say about this guy, he's in the game. So
yes, it's an association of fire chiefs.
Yes, but he's the only one who has a seat at the table in helping to establish the standards by which all of him and his competitors have to do. What is it? What is that?
Well, part of it is that it looks like at this point, I can get them to talk about this, is that all of the fire chiefs, especially of the subscription-based services, agree that things ought to be a certain way. And one outfit doesn't agree. They think it should be something else, or they think it's okay to have just one of these, or maybe not to have a emergency medical technician on the crew, or you'll hear them talk about that too. Maybe that's okay. And, an educated consumer is a good thing, but then now the question is, should it be a special message from their competitors sent to you in the mail, or should it be Cheryl Walker and the county saying, you will do it this way, or we're not even going to offer you a franchise? A franchise?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, pretty soon you're going to have to pay to play here.
Yes.
Mr. Legal Counsel, can we, and I'm not sure if this is answerable easily, yes or no, can we as a county mandate certain requirements or restrictions on a private business?
Yes.
So we can, okay, that is.
Yeah.
We do on ambulance service.
Yeah, true, that's right, yeah.
We do.
Equating it to the
She wanted to drop for the air ambulance service.
Pre-established kind of prerequisites for operating as an air service provider in Josephine County. Before we were presented with that challenge, there wouldn't have been probably all of our
Challenge.
Yeah, it would have been, no, those are the rules. We don't care if there's 30 air ambulance service providers in Josephine County. But if you're going to be here, these are the rules.
So if I'm licensed by the GPSST, I think that is correct.
No, not exactly right. Okay. He just used that as an example of the air ambulance services. Well, you've got to adhere to certain standards. Well, Cheryl Walker didn't like those standards. So she got herself and her husband, as a voting bloc, put onto the group that determined what the standards were going to be because she had an outfit in Merlin that she liked. She even accused Chief Oak out in Illinois Valley of improper behavior about this whole thing. He was not very happy. He appeared on this show and said so. So you need to look at who the players are as well. It looks like what's happening is that she favored one Merlin company and was willing to go to bat to help relax the standards and even become part of the crew that determined the standards. And in this case, she's not doing that directly, but she's got her liaison people who are doing that for her. And now it's against a Merlin company. Go ahead.
Whatever it is. You know what I'm speaking of. If I'm licensed by them or certified by them or whatever the phrase might be, is that lesser than these requirements? In other words, I've got my little business and I'm licensed by these folks and I abide by the NFPA rules and regulations. Again, I mean, why these then to come in as an onerous, for the argument, some onerous burden that I have to go now meet this lesser, I meet the greater. So that's one of the arguments that's come up.
All right, and I can see where the confusion is at. So DPSST, as I read those, is part of it that speaks specifically only to trainings and standards. And DPSST years ago had been struggling for a while because they've used the certification levels for both police, fire, criminal justice system, corrections, etc. They have an obligation that if they're a state body who's certifying and training those occupations, if you will, they needed to set minimum standards for what that level of training is going to be. But it also spoke very much to the ethics of the people who are doing that work. So they do background checks. And that's new. That's new for us in the fire service within the last 5 years. Beforehand, if you were a volunteer or even a full-time paid employee, unless that agency who was bringing you on board actually did a background check, you had no idea what their background is. So you had no idea who was walking into your house to provide you services, whether they were an ex-felon or whatever degree of criminal background that they might have been. DPSST, with all the liabilities that come along over the years, has ratcheted up the requirements for that. And so that's speaking to it, but that only speaks to the training portion of it. That doesn't talk to about the liability insurance. It doesn't talk to you about the equipment and its capabilities to perform, and whether it's in good shape or whether it's in run code 3 or not. There's different agencies across the board who regulate all that stuff. So it's not like you can go to just one stop. You're certified to provide fire services agency. You have to see the full broad spectrum of it. And it's no different than I think for any of the other types of occupations that might be out there, like being a contractor, you know, or whether you're a doctor or whoever you might be as a professional service. There isn't just one stop place to go to get all your certifications and trainings and qualifications to be able to.
So that's a good question. Shouldn't you have certain minimum standards for things like a doctor? Well, of course you should. Then here's the question. If you've got
he said it's like that because he knows that they do. The contractors have it, doctors, those are the two examples.
Right. Well, but here's the question. If you've got certain federal standards to be a doctor and to practice medicine, and to keep up your training, but beyond training and, you know, the number of patients you have and all the rest of this, and you've got state requirements. Do you, as a viewer here, do you want to have county standards that add on to those standards? Maybe you do, that say, well, we're going to do all kinds of investigations of these doctors, and if our local doctors aren't keeping up with the county standards, or maybe the Grants Pass standards, or the Cape Junction standards that are added on to all the rest of the standards, then we're not going to certify them.
You know what? I don't have a problem with the county coming up with a set of standards, but just don't require anybody to meet them, and just say, hey, listen, if you meet these standards, then you can put that little sticker on the side of your vehicle or whatever.
There you go. Right.
You know,
but they're not going to stop there. That's not where they're going to stop.
I understand, but understand this. If your doctor, if you want the county to certify your doctor, you're going to pay more for your doctor. If you want the state to certify your doctor, you're going to pay more. So with each, you know, bureaucracy, each certificate, each thing that you add to it, it's going to cost you more money. That's why it costs you $300 to go to a doctor sometimes. You know, there's some doctors that it costs that much to go. You have to pay them $300 just to get in the door, for crying out loud. That's crazy. You should pay $50. You go to the doctor, they see you for 2 minutes. You know, oh, you got a sinus infection. Let me write you a prescription for that. And, you know, by the time you're out of there, you're $250 into the thing because you can't even go down and buy Sudafed.
Now, you can still do business. And there's an advertisement that's put in the Daily Courier, if you're reading that thing, and it says the Rogue Valley area, you know, competitors to county fire service don't think that they meet the minimum standards. That's bad. It's a little bit different if the county government says, oh, by the way, go ahead and buy from these guys if you like, but they don't meet our minimum standards. And if you have any questions, call Cheryl Walker. Go ahead.
Sure. Especially in the fire service, because it's so multifaceted.
Do we know today how many, on this, whatever, page 7, do we know how many of the current service districts, stations, how many are departments, how many of them have currently a minimum of 24-hour on-duty staffing by station?
Not all of them, but I don't think the way I read that,
any of them
said that you had to have a minimum 24-hour station. I think it's talks about that if you're doing it, we'd like to.
Oh, now he's saying, hey, wait a minute. Nobody said we had to do that. That is funny. Here's the guy. He's going to tell you what standards we need to lay on these people. Whoa, wait a minute. We don't need to be there 24 hours. What are you trying to do to us?
But note, very important to note, minimum. Are you meeting the current minimum? You know, that sounds like, oh my gosh, they aren't meeting the current minimum. Well, nobody is meeting the current minimum. So why are you calling it the current minimum? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a description of the current deployment or service delivery model applicable to fire suppression services, including 1, minimum 24-hour on-duty staffing by station. 2, minimum on-call or reserve force on standby.
So that to me is the whole spectrum of whether you're a small volunteer agency that doesn't have 24-hour staffing to be a combination department where you have a little bit of both, to something like the city where you got full-time staffing. I think it's, to me, it was just saying, what are you doing for a service model and how are you doing it?
Yeah, but you can see that would cause some concern.
Well, and like you said, I think there's really good reason.
Yeah.
I think anytime you put anything like this, it has to go through a good public process.
Yeah.
So actually, the questions you're asking have to be approved.
That reminds me
You just want to define what the service is, what the meaning is to define.
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute, Keith. You're going too far.
Yeah, Keith was making too much noise with his papers, and that's where the recorder is, so it was hard to hear. But here's what Cheryl Walker just jumped in to talk about, too. This guy is saying, well, we've going to establish certain minimums. In this case, certain minimums that nobody does, so everybody's doesn't obey the minimums. And what then he tried to sort of back up and say, this is what I want you guys to see. Sort of backed up and said, well, this just says what you're doing for your services. That's different than saying you don't meet the minimums.
Yeah.
It's not just
Well-
defining what you do for your services. If you put the label on somebody, does not meet the minimum requirements. That sounds really bad. That's a competitive tool that
Yes,
is
it
then going to be laid on their competition when they say
But-
you don't meet the minimums.
I thought it was funny when he's talking about, well, a 24-hour service per station. The guy's, whoa, 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 wait just a second here. No, no, no. We need to have, this, and then the other levels. Oh, really?
We're just defining the services. Minimum doesn't mean anything. And Cheryl, can you roll it back just a little bit? Cheryl's going to agree with that.
We'd like to know.
Yeah, this is a description of the current deployment or service delivery model applicable to fire suppression services, including 1, minimum 24-hour on-duty staffing by station. 2, minimum on-call or reserve force on
Yeah,
standby.
so that to me is the full spectrum of whether you're a small volunteer agency that doesn't have 24-hour staffing to the accommodation department where you have a little bit of both, to something like the city where you got full-time staffing. I think to me, it was just saying, what are you doing for a service model and
It's
how
a
are you doing
description,
it?
the paragraph.
Yeah, but you can see how that would cause some concern to think.
Well, and like you said, I think there's really good reasoning.
Yeah.
I think anytime you put anything like this, it has to go through a good public process.
Yeah.
So actually, the questions you're asking have to be approved.
That reminds me
Just
of
want to
the letter.
define what the service is, what the meaning is to define what your service is. It doesn't mean you have to have every station named 24/7.
And so
Even though that's what it says. Yeah.
Yeah, but wait a minute.
Even
What
though
if
that's what it says.
what if one guy comes out with a truck and he has 3 shovels on the side, and the other truck comes out, he has 6 shovels? Oh, the guy that has 3 shovels, that guy, he's providing a lesser service.
He doesn't even meet the minimum
Yes, he's like a little fire mole sneaking around or something,
and doing lesser services.
Yes, that's right.
It was done by the Chiefs Association was just a way to get a reference point. Where are you going? It wasn't about whether you had to meet a certain minimum.
Just have to describe what it is. Right, if you're staffing the station 12 hours, that's 6 days or 7 days a week.
But I see in this format where, being sure.
Mhm.
So that paragraph
Reminds me of
is
a letter the owner
You definitely want to
sent yesterday to Secretary Jewell on the efficacy of Fish and Wildlife Association. That Kevin Davis, the guy who wrote it, put in a word in there, and I was like, that's not the word we want to use, because that's entirely debatable whether or not they're very efficient in their actions. It was just, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Like, that's the way I got it.
Okay.
So the description, that paragraph would just need to be rewritten that whatever level of service is being provided.
There you go. There you go. They've spent all this time, all of the fire chiefs, this powerful group of people, figuring out what the minimum should be, and they get a tiny bit of reaction from the county. Oh, well, then let's just read. Oh, we're going to rewrite this. Oh, Cheryl Walker. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to rewrite that part. So, really? This is the amount of thought that they put into this. I'm sure that they feel they put a lot of thought into it, but they were going to get away with minimum standards that none of them meet. They almost got away with it, Mike.
Well,
and then they say, well, we're not targeting anybody.
Yeah, this is the problem when you start meddling in these areas, is that you get, this is what happens. You're going to have them setting up a bunch of standards that some of them are going to be comfortable with and others won't.
Right.
I don't understand why they, what benefit do I glean from them injecting themselves into this process?
But I don't think we have time to play any more of that videotape, although we will post the entire thing immediately following the show so that you can watch it without 2 guys commenting on it, okay? So you can relax. That's going to be there. And tomorrow night, we're supposed to have, as long as everything turns out all right, the vagaries of the internet. We will have the folks from county on, and then I'm going to ask them some kind of tough questions about this. Well, shouldn't there be minimums, and shouldn't people be safe, and shouldn't the county be involved? Just don't forget what Steve Rich advised the county government when he was legal counsel, that if you get involved with what's safe and not safe, then the county could potentially be held liable for not following through. And therefore, ignorance is bliss. Mike?
Yeah. Well, that's me. I'm ignorant.
But he's blissful.